The vast emptiness of space was silent. Nothing but the distant stars and the dark void stretched in every direction. Floating amidst this infinity was a small, broken figure. Her name was Zora, a soldier of the Galactic Federation. Once she had stood proudly among her comrades, a fierce warrior ready to face any challenge. Now she was alone, abandoned, and left for dead in the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. Zora's armor was battered, with large cracks running through it, exposing the bruised and bloodied skin beneath. Her body felt like it was made of stone, heavy and unresponsive. Every breath she took was shallow, struggling to fill her lungs. Her vision swam in and out of focus, the world around her blurring into a haze of darkness. She could barely remember how it had all happened. The last thing she recalled was the battle, the ambush, the Kreth. The Kreth were merciless enemies, their advanced technology far superior to anything the Federation had. Zora's mission had been simple: locate the Kreth forces in the outer reaches of the galaxy and gather intelligence. But things had gone terribly wrong. The Kreth had been lying in wait. They had known about the Federation's plans and had been ready for the attack. One by one, Zora's comrades had fallen. Their cries were still fresh in her mind, echoing like a haunting melody. And then she had fallen too. The Kreth hadn't even bothered to capture her. After the battle, they had assumed she was dead. They left her body behind in space, thinking it was nothing more than debris. She had been forgotten, a casualty in a war that she had no chance of surviving. But Zora wasn't dead. She was hanging on by a thread, refusing to let the darkness claim her. She wasn't sure how much longer she could last, but she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. In the distance, a faint signal reached her, barely audible through the static. At first, she thought it was just her mind playing tricks on her. But then, the signal grew clearer. It was a distress beacon, a human signal. She felt a flicker of hope. She reached out with her weakened mind, trying to grab onto anything that might help her survive. The signal was far away, but it was there. A lifeline. Somehow, she managed to pull herself together long enough to activate her emergency transmitter. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate plea for help. But would anyone hear it? Would anyone come for her? The Federation had abandoned her, and the Kreth had left her to die. Who would rescue her now? Suddenly, a shadow appeared in the distance. It was a ship, small and unremarkable, but it was there. The engines hummed softly as it drew closer, cutting through the darkness. Zora's heart raced in her chest as the ship approached, each beat echoing in her head. She wasn't sure if it was real or just a vision brought on by her fading consciousness, but she clung to the hope that it was. She couldn't let herself drift into the void, not when help was so close. The ship's engine slowed as it neared her, and a voice crackled through her comms. "This is Captain Elias of the Earth Federation ship Vanguard. We've received your distress signal. Hold on, we're coming for you." Zora tried to speak, to call out, but her voice was nothing more than a faint whisper, lost to the windless space. She was too weak. All she could do was reach out with a trembling hand, her fingers brushing against the hull of the ship as it pulled close enough to lash onto her. The crew aboard the Vanguard didn't know who Zora was. They didn't know her story or the war she had fought in. To them, she was just another soldier in need of rescue. But Zora was something far more than that. She was the last survivor of a battle that had cost the lives of hundreds, and she had something within her that no one could have predicted. As they pulled her aboard the ship, Captain Elias and his crew were unaware of the storm that was about to be unleashed. They thought they were saving a soldier who had barely survived the worst of the war. They had no idea that they were bringing aboard a woman with untold power, a power that could change the course of the galaxy. Zora's body was still broken, her mind fading in and out of consciousness, but something else was stirring deep inside her, a force that had been dormant, hidden, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The moment had come. As they sealed the hatch and began to move toward Earth, Zora's eyes flickered open. The burning sensation in her chest grew stronger, as though a fire was being kindled inside her. She didn't understand it, but she felt something powerful within her, a power she had never known existed. The ship's crew continued their course, unaware of the danger that was lurking in Zora's awakening power. The Kreth had left her to die, thinking she was nothing more than a broken soldier. But they were wrong. Zora wasn't just a survivor. She was a weapon. And the galaxy was about to learn the price of underestimating humanity. Zora's body was still heavy with exhaustion, but as she lay there in the medical bay of the Vanguard, something began to shift. The hum of the ship's engines and the steady beeping of machines were faint sounds in the background. Her mind, however, was alive, flooded with images, memories, and sensations she couldn't explain. Her vision blurred for a moment as a wave of intense heat surged through her chest. It wasn't a physical sensation. It was deeper, far more visceral. It felt like a force that had been dormant for so long, buried deep within her. And now it was waking up. It wasn't just her mind that was alive. Something deep within her was stirring, and she felt its power radiating outwards. Her body jerked involuntarily, a sharp gasp escaping her lips as the sensation intensified. She clutched her chest, her breathing coming in ragged gasps as she struggled to comprehend what was happening. Was it the injuries from the battle that were causing her body to react this way? Or was something else, something far darker, beginning to take control? Captain Elias stood at the entrance to the medical bay, watching Zora closely. The crew had been briefed on the nature of her injuries, but they had no idea about the unusual readings that had appeared on their medical scanners. Her vital signs were erratic, fluctuating wildly. One moment, her heart rate would spike, and the next, it would slow down to an unnaturally low level. It didn't make sense. "We need to get a hold of this," Elias muttered under his breath, stepping into the room. He knew he couldn't let his crew panic, but he couldn't ignore what was happening. Zora had been through too much, but she was still alive, barely. There had to be more to this than just a simple injury recovery. Zora's body went rigid as the pulse of power surged again. This time, it was stronger. She felt the air around her heat up, crackling with energy. A low growl escaped her throat, a primal sound that echoed in the quiet of the room. For a brief moment, her eyes glowed a brilliant amber, a deep intensity flickering within them. It was as though a new part of her had emerged, something far beyond the warrior she had once been. Captain Elias took a cautious step forward, his voice steady but filled with concern. "Zora, can you hear me?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, her hand shot out, slamming into the medical equipment beside her. The force was so powerful that it sent the tools crashing across the room, sparking and whirling through the air. Elias staggered back in shock, barely managing to steady himself. She didn't seem to notice the destruction. Her focus was elsewhere, her entire body rigid with the power flowing through her veins. Zora's chest rose and fell rapidly, her heartbeat erratic. The room was filled with an electric charge, thick, palpable. Elias raised his hand, signaling to his crew to stay back. "Everyone, stay clear. We don't know what we're dealing with here." He turned to the ship's medics. "Get those readings back to the lab. Something's wrong. Zora's not just a survivor. She's changing." The crew of the Vanguard had all heard rumors of the extraordinary capabilities of human warriors, especially those from Earth, but none had ever seen it up close. They had always dismissed the stories as exaggerations, but what they were witnessing now was no myth. Zora was something else entirely, and whatever had been unleashed inside her, it wasn't just her power, it was something more. Zora's body spasmed as the power within her continued to surge. Her breath was ragged, and her chest felt as though it might explode from the pressure building inside her. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was an overwhelming force that was pulling at every part of her being. She felt herself losing control. Her thoughts were jumbled. She couldn't focus. She couldn't understand what was happening to her. She didn't know if she wanted to fight it or let it take over. But she did know one thing. She couldn't stay like this. She couldn't let herself become a weapon without understanding the cost. Her mind raced back to the Kreth, the merciless enemies who had almost killed her. She remembered their sneers, their cold eyes, their brutality. She remembered how they'd left her behind, thinking her defeated, broken. What if they knew what she had become now? What if they realized she was far more dangerous than they'd ever imagined? Zara's eyes flickered open once again, a flash of determination replacing the confusion that had clouded her mind. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was something greater, something far more powerful. And now she knew what she had to do. Slowly, she pulled herself up from the bed, feeling the power in her veins coursing through her. She could feel the heat inside her intensifying. But this time, she welcomed it. This power, whatever it was, could either destroy her or help her take control of her fate. "Get me out of here," Zara whispered, her voice hoarse, but strong. Elias moved toward her, concern still written across his face. "Zara, you're not in any condition to move yet. You need rest." "I don't have time to rest," Zara interrupted, her voice now steady, full of purpose. "The Kreth think I'm dead, but I'm not, and they need to know that." The captain hesitated, unsure whether to allow her to leave the med bay in her condition, but something in Zara's gaze told him that this was no ordinary soldier. She wasn't going to let anything stop her. As Zara stood and began to move toward the exit, Elias finally gave the order to let her go. There was no stopping her now. Whatever power had awoken within her, it was clear that she was a force to be reckoned with. But as Zara strode toward the ship's command center, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was only beginning to understand what she had truly become. Zara's footsteps echoed through the corridors of the Vanguard, each one punctuated with the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that no longer felt entirely her own. Her body, though still wounded, was alive in ways she had never imagined. The power coursing through her veins wasn't just physical strength. It was something more, something almost primal. The crew parted as she moved through the ship, her presence undeniable. The medics had tried to stop her, tried to make her rest, but Zara had shaken off their concern with a mere glance. She couldn't afford to waste time now, not when the Kreth, her enemies, were out there, and their invasion of Earth was only a matter of time. They'd thought her dead, abandoned to the void, but they had no idea what she had become. As she entered the command center, the crew fell silent, sensing the change in her. The ship's tactical officer, Lieutenant Janik, looked up from his console, his brow furrowing as he noticed Zora's altered demeanor. "Zara, you need to," he started, but she raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm done being a victim," Zora declared, her voice steady but edged with something darker. "You're right to be concerned, but I got something they don't. I have the power to destroy them before they even realize what hit them." Elias, still standing nearby, watched her carefully. He had known Zora as a skilled soldier, a determined woman who had fought hard to protect her people. But now there was something else in her eyes, a fire that had burned away any doubt or fear. The same fire that had been ignited by the power she had unknowingly unlocked. He exchanged a look with Janik, who gave him a small nod, signaling his willingness to follow Zora's lead. They had no choice now. The Vanguard's mission was to fight, to defend humanity, and Zara was their weapon. "Very well," Elias said. "What's the plan?" Zora's expression remained hard as steel. "We're going to make the Kreth regret ever thinking they could conquer Earth. I'm going to find them, and I'll end them, but I won't be doing it alone." She turned toward the ship's commander and continued, her voice resolute. "Activate the Vanguard's full combat readiness. I need a crew ready to fight, not just to defend, but to go on the offensive. We're not waiting for them to invade. We're going to their doorstep." The officers around the command center exchanged uncertain glances, but the atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. This was no longer a simple mission to defend. This was war, but it wasn't the same kind of war they had expected to fight. This time, humanity would strike first, and Zara was leading the charge. Zara stepped forward, her every movement now purposeful. She could feel the power growing inside her, a force that was no longer confined to her mind or her body. It was now something she could control. She knew that with every passing moment, she was becoming more than a soldier. She was becoming an unstoppable force. The Kreth might have underestimated her once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. The ship's engines hummed to life as the crew quickly began preparations. The lights on the bridge flickered for a moment, and the tactical display came to life, revealing the Kreth fleet's last known coordinates. "They'll be expecting us to wait," Zora said, looking at the map, her finger tracing the lines of their position. "But we're not going to wait. We'll hit them fast, hard, and from every direction. They won't have time to react." Captain Elias nodded, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. He had seen many officers take command in moments of crisis, but Zara was something else. She wasn't just commanding a battle, she was reshaping the war itself. A human, one who had been abandoned, discarded like trash. But now she was a weapon of unimaginable power. Zara glanced up at the screen, and for the first time since her awakening, she felt no fear, no hesitation. The Kreth had made a grave mistake in leaving her alive. She wasn't just some survivor they could ignore. She wasn't just a soldier from Earth. She was their reckoning. "Prepare for warp jump," Zara ordered, her voice a steady command that brooked no argument. "We're taking the fight to them." The crew worked in unison, the hum of the Vanguard's engines building to a crescendo as they prepared for their jump to light speed. Zara's mind was focused, her body and soul in perfect harmony with the power she now wielded. She could feel it swirling inside her, waiting for the moment she would unleash it. As the ship's engines powered up and the countdown began, Zara's thoughts turned to the Kreth. The same enemies who had thought nothing of her life, who had abandoned her to die. They were the ones who would pay. She wasn't just a human now. She was something far beyond them. Something they would never see coming. The jump was imminent. Zara clenched her fists at her sides, ready for whatever awaited them. The crew of the Vanguard was about to embark on a mission they had never prepared for. But they would fight, not just for survival, but for their home. For Earth. The countdown reached 0. The ship leaped forward into the void, and the crew braced themselves for the journey ahead. As the Vanguard disappeared into the blackness of space, Zara knew that the battle had only just begun, and with every passing moment, she was becoming the weapon that would change everything. The Vanguard's engines roared, the ship hurtling through space at faster-than-light speeds as the crew braced for the confrontation ahead. Zara stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of her. The Kreth fleet was just ahead, the enemy warships clustering like a swarm of menacing insects ready to strike. "Prepare for engagement," Zara commanded, her voice steady, almost unnervingly calm. Her body hummed with the power coursing through her veins, but her mind was laser-focused on the task at hand. She could sense the tension rising in the crew around her, but they trusted her now, following her lead without question. Lieutenant Janik's fingers flew over the ship's controls, activating the weapon systems. The Vanguard was equipped with the most advanced technology Earth had ever developed, and now it was their secret weapon against the Kreth. But Zara knew it wasn't just the ship's power that would win the day. It was her. A sudden flash of light signaled the arrival of the Kreth fleet. Zara could see the enemy ships emerging from the black void, their jagged edges gleaming under the light of distant stars. They were massive, imposing, and terrifying. But to Zara, they were nothing more than targets. And she had become a hunter. The tactical officer, Janik, spoke up. "They've detected us. Weapons ready." Zara nodded, her jaw tightening. "Good. Let them think they have the upper hand. We're going to give them a taste of Earth's power." She turned to Elias, who stood beside her. His eyes were filled with a mixture of awe and uncertainty, but he remained silent, waiting for her next command. Zara didn't need to say anything. He knew what she was thinking. They had one chance to hit the Kreth hard, to catch them off guard before they could retaliate. The first salvo came from the Kreth warships, energy blasts streaking toward the vanguard. The shields flickered as the ship absorbed the impact, but Zara could feel the stress building in the ship's structure. She could hear the crew's voices as they fought to keep the ship stable, but she knew there was no turning back now. Evasive maneuvers, Zara barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. Engage the FTL weapons. With a flick of her hand, the Vanguard's weapon systems powered up, and Zara could feel the energy charging through the ship, resonating with the same power that had awakened inside her. She reached out with her mind, her consciousness expanding, connecting with the ship's systems in a way that felt almost natural. Her eyes flared with golden energy as she focused, and the first volley of weapons fired. Bright beams of light shot from the Vanguard, tearing through the Kreth fleet with devastating precision. The enemy ships exploded in bursts of light, their once imposing forms shattered by the sheer power of the attack. The Kreth were caught off guard. Their ships, massive and technologically superior, couldn't react in time. Zara had led them into a trap they didn't even know existed, and now Earth's first strike had shaken them to their core. But it wasn't over. Zara knew that this was only the beginning. The Kreth would retaliate, and their next strike would be even more devastating. She had to keep them off balance, keep them guessing. "Keep firing," Zara commanded, her voice unshaken. "We can't let up." The Vanguard unleashed wave after wave of destruction, the enemy fleet crumbling under the assault. But even as she watched the Kreth ships fall, Zara's mind raced. There was something bigger at play here, something more than just a battle. The Kreth were not just invaders. They were part of a larger plan. And Zara knew that this was only a small piece of a much larger war. "Commander," Elias called, his voice tense. "We've taken out a significant portion of their fleet, but they're regrouping. More ships are coming." Zara didn't flinch. "Let them come. We're not done yet." But as the Kreth regrouped, Zara's mind flickered with a strange sensation. She could feel the power within her, but there was a new presence in the depths of her mind. Something unfamiliar, something she couldn't yet understand. It was as if the power inside her was calling out. And for the first time, Zara felt a pang of doubt. What was happening to her? The power was growing, shifting, and with it, she felt a growing sense of danger. What had the Kreth done to her when they left her for dead? And what would she become once the power reached its peak? But there was no time to dwell on these questions. The Kreth were coming in waves, their ships growing more desperate with each assault. Zara had to focus. She had to finish this. "Activate the quantum cannons," Zara ordered, her voice cold. "We're going to end this." The Vanguard's weapons powered up to a level beyond anything Earth had ever seen, the quantum cannons charging to full capacity. Zara could feel the immense energy flowing through the ship, and she knew this would be the final blow. With a single command, the cannons fired. The blast of energy tore through space, hitting the Kreth fleet with the force of 1,000 suns. Entire ships disintegrated in an instant, their remains scattering across the void like ashes in the wind. The Kreth, who had once been so sure of their victory, were now nothing more than a broken, scattered remnant of their former strength. The Vanguard had delivered a blow they would never recover from. Zara had done what she promised. She had turned the tide of the war. But as the battle ended and the crew stood in stunned silence, Zara's mind remained focused on the distant stars. The Kreth might be beaten for now, but she knew the war was far from over. There were forces at play that she couldn't yet understand, and she had to stay ready. The Vanguard had won its first battle, but the true fight for Earth was just beginning. The calm that followed the battle was short-lived. Though the crew of the Vanguard celebrated their victory, Zara remained at the helm, her thoughts clouded by the strange sensation that still pulsed within her. She could feel it, a power that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as if it was alive, moving, growing within her, a silent presence that called out to her, demanding her attention. She had been in command of the Vanguard during the battle, leading her crew to victory against the Kreth fleet. But the victory felt hollow. The power inside her was both a blessing and a curse, and Zara knew deep down that it was changing her in ways she couldn't yet understand. What if it was not just a gift, but a weapon? What if it had a purpose far beyond Earth's defense? "Commander," Elias's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing behind her, his brow furrowed with concern. He had been at her side during the battle, and his loyalty was unshaken. But something in his eyes told her that he had noticed the change in her, just as she had. "What is it, Elias?" Zara asked, trying to hide the unease in her voice. "I've been analyzing the data from the battle," Elias said, stepping closer. "The Kreth, they didn't just attack Earth for resources. Their fleet was far more advanced than we anticipated. They were after something specific." Zara's heart skipped a beat. "What were they after?" "I think they were after you, Commander," Elias replied, his voice low and serious. "The way you activated the Vanguard's weapons, there was something in your signal, something they responded to." Zara's mind raced. Could it be true? Had the Kreth known about her power all along? Were they trying to stop her before she became a threat to them? "You're saying they knew?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Elias answered. "But they've been tracking something, and I believe it's connected to you. There's more to this than just Earth and the Kreth." Zara stood silently for a moment, her mind reeling with the implications. The Kreth weren't just an invading force. They had a reason for their actions, and it was directly linked to her. But why? What was it about her that made her such a target? And how had the power within her become so dangerous? "Commander," Elias prompted, bringing her back to the present. Zara took a deep breath. "Get the crew ready. We're going to find out exactly what the Kreth are after, and what this power inside me really is." As she spoke, Zara felt the pull of the power once again. It was subtle, a slight tug in the back of her mind, but it was there. The sensation grew stronger with each passing moment, and Zara knew that she couldn't ignore it much longer. It was as if the power was calling to her, urging her to move forward. But what awaited them on this next leg of the journey? What secrets lay ahead? The crew of the Vanguard was ready for another mission, but Zara knew that this time, they weren't just fighting for Earth, they were fighting for the truth. "We're going to have to be careful," Zara said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We don't know what the Kreth are capable of, or what else is out there, but we're going to find out, and we're going to make sure Earth stays safe." The crew nodded, their expressions determined. They had seen the power of the Vanguard and its crew, and now they trusted Zara completely. She had led them to victory once before, and they would follow her again into the unknown. The Vanguard's engines hummed to life, and the ship began its journey into the depths of space once more. The stars outside the window glowed with cold indifference, but inside the Vanguard, there was a sense of urgency, a knowing that they were headed into the heart of something far more dangerous than any of them could have anticipated. As the ship accelerated into the darkness, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Kreth were only one part of the puzzle, and the more she learned about her own powers, the more she understood that there were forces far beyond what anyone could comprehend. What was the true nature of this power that had awakened within her? What was its purpose? And most importantly, who was watching them now? The answers lay ahead, waiting to be uncovered in the depths of space. But Zara knew one thing for certain. The stakes were higher than ever. The Vanguard had delivered a crushing blow to the Kreth, but the real battle was just beginning, and the enemy they faced now might not be the Kreth at all. Zara's eyes narrowed as she gazed out into the void. Whatever was coming next, she would be ready. The Vanguard was her ship, and Earth was counting on her to lead them into the unknown. But there was something else, something that whispered in the back of her mind, growing louder with each passing moment. The true enemy was out there, and soon Zara would be forced to face the terrifying truth. As the Vanguard cruised deeper into space, the tension on board grew. Every crew member felt it, the weight of the unknown. They were no longer just dealing with the Kreth. There was something larger, something hidden, lurking just beyond their reach. Zara had known from the beginning that the Kreth weren't the only threat. But now, with the power inside her growing stronger and the mysteries piling up, she had no idea what was waiting for them on the other side of the galaxy. Zara sat in her command chair, staring at the vast, endless void of space. The stars outside appeared distant and cold, like tiny pinpricks in the darkness. But something was changing. Something was shifting. The power inside her pulsed again, stronger this time, and she could feel it in her chest. It wasn't just an energy, it was a presence, an ancient force that had been dormant for millennia. "Commander," Elias' voice snapped her back to reality. "We've picked up a strange signal. It's coming from a nearby system." Zara's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The moment that could change everything. The moment when they would finally uncover the truth. "Show me," Zara ordered, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The display screen flickered to life, showing a map of the surrounding space. A small system, just a few light years away, blinked on the screen. There, in the heart of that system, was the source of the signal, a massive structure, unlike anything they had seen before. It was ancient, its design sleek and yet strangely alien. It radiated a strange energy, one that seemed to resonate with Zara's power. "What is that?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't match any known civilization's architecture," Elias said, his voice tinged with awe. "And the energy signature, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's almost as if it's connected to you." Zara's breath caught in her throat. Could it be? Was this the source of the power she had been feeling? Was this structure linked to the force inside her? And what was its purpose? "We're going to investigate," Zara said, her voice firm with determination. "Prepare the crew. We need to learn everything we can about this place." The Vanguard altered course, heading toward the strange signal. As they drew closer to the system, Zara's heart raced. She could feel the power growing within her, as if it were urging her forward. There was no turning back now. The ship descended toward the mysterious structure, and the crew's excitement and nervousness mixed into a tense silence. The Vanguard slowly circled the structure, studying every angle. There were no signs of life, no visible entry points. It appeared abandoned, but Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them inside. As they neared the surface, the ship's sensors began to glitch. The data was becoming corrupted, like some kind of interference was blocking their ability to scan the area properly. "This doesn't feel right," Elias muttered, his voice laced with unease. Zara nodded. She felt it too. Something was off. The structure seemed to be alive, its energy pulsing in rhythm with the power inside her. As the Vanguard hovered above the surface, Zara's hand trembled slightly on the console. "Commander, the signal is getting stronger," Elias warned. "It's coming from inside the structure, but I don't know if we can safely enter." Zara looked around at her crew. They had already come this far. They couldn't turn back now. "We're going in," she said decisively. "Activate the boarding pods." With a low hum, the Vanguard released several boarding pods, each one carrying a small team of crew members. Zara led the way, stepping into one of the pods, her heart pounding in her chest. The others followed her lead, their faces tense with anticipation. The pod descended slowly toward the surface, its thrusters barely making a sound. As they touched down, Zara could feel the energy in the air, crackling with power. The structure loomed before them, dark and silent. Zara stepped out of the pod, her boots making a soft thud against the cold ground. The others followed her, and together, they moved toward the entrance. The air around them seemed thick, almost heavy, as if the very atmosphere was charged with a strange magnetic force. "There's something here," Zara said, her voice steady but laced with a deep sense of foreboding. I can feel it. The crew gathered around her as they approached the entrance, a large arched doorway that seemed to pulse with energy. It was as if the structure was inviting them in, daring them to step closer. But Zara hesitated for a moment, sensing that this was more than just a physical structure. It was a beacon calling to her, and it wanted her to enter. Without another word, she stepped through the doorway. Inside, the air was thick with an unnatural silence. The walls were covered in strange symbols and markings, glowing faintly in the dim light. The power inside Zara responded, growing stronger with each step she took. The crew followed her, their steps echoing in the vast, empty halls. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A low rumble filled the air, and the walls seemed to shift, opening up to reveal a massive chamber. At the center of the room stood an ancient altar, surrounded by glowing symbols. And there on the altar lay something that took Zora's breath away. It was a crystal, glowing with an otherworldly light, pulsing with the same energy that she had felt inside her all along. Zora stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the crystal, the power inside her growing stronger, almost as if it were responding to the crystal itself. But before she could touch it, the chamber trembled again, and a voice echoed in her mind. "You are not ready, but you will be." Zara froze, her heart racing. The voice was ancient, filled with power and wisdom. But what did it mean? And who was speaking to her? The answers were closer than she realized. As she reached for the crystal, the ground shook violently, and the chamber filled with an eerie light. Everything was about to change.